but very very rare that I see the conversation puts in the conflict factor in the dialogue. So, and for that, we have the very right composition of speakers already joining with us. Let me introduce to you, we have Dr. Iyad Abu Mohli, the Principal Advisor at the UN Environment Program, who's also the Director of the Faith for Earth Coalition at the United Nations Environment Program. And he leads efforts to engage faith-based organizations in addressing world's environmental challenges with 40 years of experience. Also, we have Ms. Dayu, specialist at the World Bank for Natural Resources Management. She's also a senior fellow at the institution where I am also in, Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, and a faculty member at International Relations Department in Bina Nusantara University in Indonesia. We also have Nishat Shafi from Qatar, a climate expert, environmentalist, social change advocate. He was distinguished as one of the world's 100 most influential people in climate policy 2019 by Apolitical. And he had over 5 years of experience in analyzing global environmental politics and climate policies, with particular focus on the Middle East, a very interesting region to talk about this climate agenda and issue. Let me now get to the meat of the discussion by starting with Dr. Iyad Abu Mohli, with your unique role in colliding the two things on engaging faith-based organizations and in handling and tackling environmental challenges. Can you give us your overview on what is the importance of engaging these faith-based organizations when it comes to talking about environmental challenges across the world, and share to us also what you're working on and some lesson learned that you can help to enlighten us on this collision of two different things.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Well, I mean, this is an excellent question. Excellent because, first of all, I lead the Faith for Earth Coalition at the United Nations Environment Program. After we have established and adopted a strategy for engaging with faith-based organizations. And we did so because we understand the vital role and having faith-based organizations as partners in addressing global environmental challenges. And that was for several reasons. If we take it from a scientific and strategic standpoint, we are, of course, everybody knows that we are confronting the triple planetary crises, the climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And all of them are tremendous challenges that we are facing. And these, what we consider these as not just environmental challenges, they are deeply moral ones, touching on the justice, intergenerational equity, and our collective responsibility for the earth. So faith traditions, if you look at all of them, they speak powerfully to these principles. In each of the religions that we have been working with, more than 15 to 20 major religions, major in the terms of the number of followers, we got to understand that in their scripts, in their practices, in their teachings, they all teach how to live in harmony with nature. Second, everybody knows by now that the research shows that more than 85% of the global population of normal people, they associate or identify themselves to a religion or a tradition. And that is massive. We're talking about more than 7.5 billion people that have a point of reference for their behavior, for their practices, and for how they relate with nature. The other point is that faith-based organizations have massive economic and social powers. You know, when we talk about the economic powers of faith organizations, we're talking about trillions of dollars that are being invested on an annual basis, and investments are not necessarily clean or environmentally friendly. They do invest in banks, they do invest in fossil fuel, and so on and so forth. So it is important to bring faith organizations to uphold the principles of sustainability and redirect their investments into environmentally sustainable investments. Now, the other part, the social component of the leadership of faith organizations or faith leaders, is that they have the massive power of mobilizing communities. You know, a call for prayer on Sunday or Friday or Saturday brings millions of people together to worship God. And messages are often given in these you know, gatherings on, you know, how to be a good family member, how to be a good society member, and so on. But rarely it includes talking about climate change and environmental degradation and what have you. So there is a potential of massive mobilization of faith organizations. Over the past 8 years of the life of the Faith for Earth Coalition, we have got to understand that, you know, faith organizations can bridge the gap between high-level policy and science and the grassroots action. So because of their ability to mobilize communities quickly and effectively in facing environmental disasters and other disasters. I mean, they are the first responders to any disaster anywhere because of, you know, normal conditions of disasters. I mean, earthquakes, volcanoes, and so on. So they are very rightly positioned to mobilize massive support. But also they can frame climate adaptation and mitigation as a moral imperative, not just as a technical solution. And this is very important because we, in addition to moving or mobilizing the minds of the people, we need to mobilize their hearts and their convictions and their behaviors. And of course, in many cases, faith organizations can de-escalate conflicts, especially if they are related to climate change and tensions over water resources and land displacement. For example, there are many examples in the Sahel or the Horn of Africa. We've seen religious networks engaging in peace building around resources or resource access and helping to ease tensions caused by climate-induced scarcity or other reasons. In India and in Indonesia, for example, religious institutions have led restoration and reforestation campaigns. They have led plastic bans and clean energy transition and so on. From our perspective, you know, Faith for Earth Coalition, in addition to dozens and dozens now of other environmentally focused faith-based organizations, have been working with hundreds and hundreds of faith organizations. We developed, for example, the faith consistent environmental guidance, including Al-Mizan Covenant for the Earth, but we have supported, of course, Laudato Si, that was published by the Vatican, and we have supported all other religious perspectives on the environment. It's important to work on capacity building and generating tools and teachings like, you know, connecting the faith perspectives to the contemporary issues. If we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to translate that into a language that is understood by faith actors. When we talk about the MDCs and the commitments of governments, what does that mean for faith actors? The mobilization of multi-faith cooperation is important because we combine the powers of different traditions. So what I would like to conclude with is that the overarching message here is that the environmental movement can no longer afford to overlook faith voices. If we want to have transformative change, not just incremental shifts, we must engage those who guide hearts and guide minds. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. That's a very good starter for the conversation, and I think a unique perspective and often overlooked actually in climate efforts across the world. And it's very important to make the grassroots movement really going with that power of mobilizing and translating the words into digestible and so on and so forth. And I'm curious to hear more about that. But let me turn to Ms. Dayu Nirma Amurwanti. Even if the grassroots movement and the civil society organizations are working on climate issues, climate actions, but really at the top level, when it comes to policy and the financing, we still fall short a lot, especially developing world. How do you explain this gap of massive funds and financing that we're lacking at the moment to achieve what we have been trying to achieve so far from the Global South, Ms. Dayu?
Thank you so much for the Asian Network and FTC for me. Of course, when we talk about the need for climate, IPCC reports 2 billion people are already experiencing direct impacts from extreme climate events. So from the previous COP, they have stressed that if we talk about financing needs, it's no longer in the billions, it's already in the trillions. So whatever that is being pledged internationally is no longer sufficient. And even when we pledge collectively of 100 billion, climate finance 20 billion every year. So even in the previous commitment, we fell short. And the need is way larger than that. In terms of adaptation, for example, we're talking about losses due to failures of crops or agriculture and harvesting. We're talking about probably an estimate of 5% of annual GDP going into covering these losses. So how can we respond to this? We also, I'm sure you are also going to mention that the US has pulled out from its climate change commitments. The USAID is being reviewed. A lot of their climate programs are stopped, and they actually are significant contributors to climate finance. They call finance globally. The good news is there are other countries that are willing to step up to fill this gap. Germany, for example, if we talk about the Just Energy Transition Partnership, they have declared that we want to take the lead. We want to fill the gap or the void that the US is left. We also talk about the role of the multilateral financial institutions. I come from the World Bank, where there are no projects that are not Paris aligned. So as the primary prerequisite for any project that will be approved by the World Bank board, they have to be Paris aligned. They have to contribute to climate prevention and adaptation of climate change. And this is also true to other multilateral development banks, such as the African Development Bank, the American Development Bank. So in that sense, we hope that we can fill the gap. And also with that, there are also private capitals, impact investors. And it seems like we are getting more innovative financing at the fore. In South Africa, for example, we have a bond that is being issued related to wildlife conservation that is called the Rhinoceros Bond. In Indonesia, perhaps we're thinking of doing the same, perhaps looking at conservation of marine protected areas. In China, there's already innovative financing for national park where community development is part of that. So in terms of or seeing and experiencing a number of innovative ways, new financing, new bilateral donors stepping up to the challenge, and multilaterals are still meeting this role. So I hope that that answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Tayu. Before I turn to Nishat, I want to follow up on this as well. You talk about where alternative finance can be found with the US retreating and so on and so forth. But definitely we can't achieve what we want to achieve on time unless we create sort of a massive incentives for the private to mobilize this. And do you think the demand is already there, or is it hindered by policies or something else? Because Southeast Asian region is a massive population already, over 600 million people, but that doesn't make sense if the incentive is not there when we have such a big market to do so. What's wrong in this case? Yeah.
I think in terms of the demand, we can say that Southeast Asia, with a number of countries that are very susceptible to climate change, the need is there. It's inevitable. So when we're talking about demand, the demand is there. However, the Southeast Asian countries have different capacities. One in providing the right policy framework, the right incentives to mobilize and incentivize private sector to come in and provide their capital to invest in technologies. Even when we talk about introducing smart agriculture, that is probably easiest, providing sustainable access to energy and electricity. So I think capacity needs to be built for some countries who are still in those in need for capacity building, not only in providing the right policy framework, the right incentive, but also in investing in the right infrastructure, the right skills, and the right technology. And also, I think the international community, especially the financial multilateral institutions, we can also play that part, not only in providing but providing funding. We have environmental facility, the adaptation. There needs to be a bit of a boost in capacity to tap into those resources and to attract private sector investment, and also to develop the technology at home that is meeting the needs of the community.
Thank you, Ms. Dayu. Now I want to turn to Nishat. Nishat, you're coming from a region that is very challenging at this time, and also especially if we want to talk about climate agenda and so on. You've been putting efforts to mainstreaming this issue on climate in the region, and you've been successful in doing so as well. But a great work to do, really. Can you share your experience and also share to us how can we make sure a region that is currently also still in conflict and very much distrust can work together on this very critical issue, climate action agenda, and with the targets falling short, and your region is also relying so much on oil? Please, Nishat.
Thank you, Jenny. Let me take this opportunity to thank the Asia Network and Mr. Ravindra for inviting me. It's also good to see my very good friend and mentor, Dr. Iab, here with us. So I would be short of my words because we have experts and who are here. So just to reiterate on those comments, yes, in terms of climate, the region, I feel at this moment is looking at a different direction. Like you mentioned, one of the key issues, like the humanitarian issues, have kept on top of agenda. And from my understanding, it should be, given the tragic incidents we have seen in the region, need attention, especially the Palestinian issues. It's posed a lot of tension. How we can bring sort of a peace in the region is top of the agenda. We're glad we're seeing some changes in Syria and some other areas which will bring climate agenda to top of the priority beyond peace building. And climate and security is always connected. I mean, if you don't have peace, the impacts of climate are sometimes drown out of some of the local environmental issues. So that's why we need to interlink climate to security, and it should be seen that angle. I mean, regionally, countries have been talking about transition, all good to the last two COPs in the region, back to back from Egypt to Dubai. There's a lot of push from how the transition away from fossil fuel can be. I mean, it would be a matter of fact also fun to say that the whole word of transition away from fossil fuel was coined in Dubai, not in Europe, not in Katowice, not in Glasgow. It was in UAE. So I think there is a momentum, and the leadership here in the region looks at sort of a transition, which I should say in a just way. I mean, we should also look at how the global south, including the West Asia, has its due space to grow, which global north already did in the last 100 years. So it has to be an equitable transition, not that, these countries are oil and gas and the rest of the world are doing the great thing now. Even you mentioned the Just Transition Network that Germany started. The Gulf countries are part of this network. Also, in the matter of fact, you have seen recently some of the transition efforts are not working. The blackout in Portugal was a big blow to what transition looked like. So the same goes to when the whole the Ukrainian war started. Europe fumbled and went back to coal. So we should not forget how the global North's transition should not be a gimmick for to blame global South not to make sure that people take the people out of their poverty. So they have a commitment to the governments in the global South to make sure that people are taken out of poverty, they have enough energy security, which the global North have been always enjoying, and still they are not having the technology that can really rely on to. So I see the region, there is a transition. There's a large discourse on what the transition should look like. And if you look at the net zero target of many of the Gulf countries, I mean, 5 years back, if you would have asked me, I would have never echoed that this countries would ever even come up with a net zero target 2050 or 2060. So likely there is a high level discussion which direction they want to do. And that's also at the same time how that can be done in a just way. I mean, for also just to give a backdrop of when we say the region is oil and gas, the consumers are the European consumer, are the low level, Asian, rich Asian countries like Japan or China or Singapore. So these are the countries who rely on them. I mean, I am of the opinion there is no consumer, there is no oil and gas coming from the region. So transition has to be done from both the producer and the consumer. It cannot be one way aligned where only producers are blamed for building the infrastructure. I will not build a new home if I don't want to live, right? We will not produce oil and gas if there is no consumer or there is a market for it. I think that has been reduced since our large reliance on renewables. We are moving towards a sort of energy, green hydrogen, etc. So this transition is happening, but I should say the pace is slow, but I think the intentions are great. So that would be my opening remarks.
Thank you, Nishad. I think a lot of questions I can follow up from there. In fact, by the way, just a fun fact, our first floating solar in Indonesia is an investment result from the UAE, actually. So that's a very good example of a South-South cooperation and proving that we can actually do something together. Dr. Iyad, I want to turn back to you. Before we talk about the importance of engaging communities, and in terms of policy, how bottom up do you think an effective policy should be, and to what degree? And also, is there any best practice examples of how a bottom up policy that is engaging communities can bring about better results?
Thank you very much for this crucial question. A just green transition must be inclusive and participatory, and also must be context sensitive. And that means grounding it in the knowledge, rights, and leadership of local and indigenous communities. You take it at the global level, everybody now is talking about the role of indigenous people and indigenous culture and so on. And because indigenous people manage more than 80% of the biodiversity resources at the global level. However, they only represent 5%. But the tradition, the traditional way of living in harmony with nature is there and has been working for centuries until we have started adopting the unsustainable practices. Science increasingly is validating what indigenous and traditional custodians of land have long practiced, living in harmony with ecosystems and protecting its diversity and natural resources. As I mentioned, 80% of the resources are managed by indigenous people, but there is also other traditional knowledge that is available. For example, the practices of and teachings of religious institutions and religious communities. Now, to ensure synergy between, global scientific way of doing things and the grassroots and cultural movements, we need first to move from consultation to co-creating, because it's not enough to invite indigenous people to attend conferences or faith organizations to contribute to a policy paper. It has to be co-created, starting from the base and moving forward. So, because too often policies are designed in capital cities and global. Apologies for the phone. So the policies are designed in Europe, in the US, global summits, and then translated downwards to communities. So this is wrong. The good thing or the best thing to do is the co-creation. Second, policy must acknowledge land tenure, customary governance, and spiritual relationships with nature. Legal recognition and secure land rights are fundamental for environmental stewardship. However, we need to move beyond formal law to ensure that cultural practices are an integral part of the solution. And we have started in UNEP, the law division, we have started a strategic framework for how to mobilize beyond formal law practices, cultural practices, people's understanding, even the blame and shame practices that deter people from being, abusers of the environment. So, to what degree should policy be bottom up? As far as possible, especially in implementation and adaptation and stewardship, top-down coordination can provide frameworks and financing, but lasting transformation depends on local ownership. In Ecuador, for example, the rights of nature and constitution are constitutionally recognized. So there is in Ecuador, in the constitution of the country, elements of the right of nature, not only human rights, but nature rights. In Africa, the Green Belt movement in Kenya, part of it, founded by Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, is a powerful example of how grassroots or grassroots women's leadership can restore degraded ecosystems while at the same time advancing livelihoods and providing livelihood opportunities to the people. There are many good examples out there, but we must remember that climate justice is not a slogan. It is a strategy. And it starts by recognizing that those closest to the land are not just stakeholders, they are rights holders, they are knowledge holders and solution holders. So we have to work, as I mentioned, in co-creating solutions with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. I want to turn to Nishat again. Nishat, the Middle East region, I think it's not, well, at least for me, I haven't been familiar with the landscape of how multi-stakeholder civil society institutions might be working together in the Middle East, and how do you see the best and effective methods of engaging all these different stakeholders in Qatar and in any other countries from the region?
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, I mean, again, the question goes back 4 or 5 years back. You would not be seeing a lot of engagement between civil society and governments. Since the sort of the Arab Spring movement, a lot of civil society organizations now working on climate justice, women movement, which has climate as one of the main thematic. Even large youth organizations have been emerged. I mean, the Arab Youth Climate Movement in Qatar, which I co-founded in Qatar in 2019, was emerged during those times when there was a vacuum of youth-led initiatives in the region, especially from the Gulf point of view, the Gulf countries. Moving forward 5 years down the line, you can see the number of organizations have increased drastically, whether it's women-led initiative, youth-led initiative, civil society-oriented initiatives have grown drastically. And there has been a sort of engagement with the respective governments also. The fact is, in the past, the whole climate issues were seen from an angle that it is the government-only issue. Government dictates what their emissions should look like, etc. But that sort of consultations were never happening. Now I see those consultations are pretty common. Most of the countries NDC do mention women and youth in their document, mentioning that they are key partner in this sort of climate adaptation plan or mitigation plan, and they see this as a co-partner or co-creators with them, like how Dr. Yad mentioned. So there is a sense of bottom-up approach in a large context in a few countries. I would not compare the country to country, but that has been growing, and which is great for climate movement, and that are really helping in some countries the government a lot, because this capacity what young women or young men or the civil society as large can bring onto table is massive, because they are the people who understand the demography, those are the people who understand the things on the ground. Unlike policymakers only see very top-down approach, right? The civil society bring that knowledge. Like Dr. Yad mentioned, indigenous knowledge have been now considered in some of the countries to how to tackle drought. So just things, a policymaker from Harvard or Oxford will not really get that, because that's knowledge transferred from generation to generation. So this sort of engagements can be seen in some of the countries like Morocco, Jordan, or in Algeria. So that is becoming common and common. And having youth representation and women representation at regional and global events also increased. But yes, there is a lot of room to improvement, I should say. So these are some of my observations that civil society movement have gained traction. Not 100%, but if you were asking me 3 or 5 years back, it wasn't the case at all. So now this sort of change is something I think I see moving forward as a positive step. Now we need to capacity build, provide them enough funding. That's also a key issue for many NGOs in the region. Like our colleague Dayu mentioned, since USAID and other international agencies have been stopped providing support, a lot of the NGOs in the region were receiving those sort of support from international agencies like USAID. Now there need to be some sort of agency that would be replacing them, making sure the work they've been doing can be taken forward or not stalled. Because some of them, the USAID offices are closed forever and left the region for bad. So that will have severe implications, and also to see how regional sort of philanthropy can be encouraged to fund or build that or fill up that vacuum also. So I see there is potential within the civil society, youth and women organization. But what we need is to build their capacity, provide them the necessary support, and plus a sort of funding opportunities which can be accessible to all the organization.
Thank you, Nishad. Now I want to throw a question that is relevant to all of the panelists. I think since we're coming from the global south, there's always this notion on there's point of contention between the north and the south when we talk about climate agenda and the standards particularly. Well, in Southeast Asia, we have Indonesia and Malaysia standing up, having a standoff with Europe on the standard. Not sure if we have any points of contention in the Middle East towards the north and so on. But there's always this difference, and in the way we view the regulation, the standard, and the way we move forward. Because again, developing world still needs a lot of energy burn for our economic growth, and that's often the root of all the other contentions, the way we approach things. Do you think we have come up with the global South way of achieving a climate target? In ASEAN, we always talk about ASEAN way to make sure that the external powers doesn't impose to us the way we do things. And Global South seems to have this shared aspiration on how we achieve the climate goals. And have we had really the Global South way, or are we still, sporadically doing things around and so on? Yeah. Either Dr. Iyad or Nishat or Ms. Dayu, if you're available already, can also jump in.
Well, if I may start, there is an acceptable strategy now or agreement, which is called common but differentiated responsibilities, right? And this acknowledges the historic role of developed countries in where we are now and the contribution to climate change and other environmental issues. And the understanding is that also developed countries, they need to contribute to mitigating and adapting to climate change and so on. However, this is used in negotiations against the South. That, we have agreed with you that we have a common problem, and it is, common understanding and common responsibility. So you start and pay for whatever is causing climate change. But indeed, when in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the loss and damage trust fund was agreed to be established, that was a testimony of the responsibility of developed countries to pay the damage that has been done by them to the global community. However, again, developed countries are using it as a charity fund, not as an equity and justice or fund of justice to pay back for what they have contributed. So I think the role that can be paid or played by the countries in the South is to demand the respect of, this is a development financing. It's not charity, it's not aid. We are not asking for loans. This is exactly the right that we have given you. I mean, the developed countries came to Africa, to Asia, extracted all the minerals and the resources and built their economies, and they built the carbon-based economies. And now they're asking the South to stop polluting, which they have not done. So it is a strategic approach. At the same time, we do not have to start from scratch. Technology is available, solutions are available, even especially in the South. I mean, in Malaysia, in China, and other countries, the production of sustainable systems is massive and is proving to be even cheaper than coal-based technologies, especially if we talk about solar systems. So we don't have to start from scratch. There are trusted and even experienced and tried technologies that should stop being, as initiatives here and there. They need to be the mainstream. There has to be adoption of policies and incentives and tax relaxation on the utilization of renewable sources of energy, water-saving devices, biodiversity protecting machines and so on. So, there is this double play that we can do from the South. First of all, demand what is right. And second, start from where technology is available now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. Nishat, perhaps you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo with what Dr. Yad mentioned. The global north point of view of you not do anything without providing incentives cannot be acceptable. It has to be the technology transfer, the fund they agreed on. If not, they have the right to use their carbon budget, which US has or other global north countries have exhausted years back. So I think, like Dr. Yad mentioned, now there is a lot of technologies that can be transferred to the global south countries. I have the opinion that it should not be loaned, it should not be given as subsidized, it should be offered for free for what they have done. So you cannot charge for that technology transfer as a part of like maybe that like the World Bank loan, and the countries are still on debt to pay back that after many years. So that would be again burden on some of the countries which are super developing or underdeveloped countries in global south. So I feel what the global south should start demanding, but the problem is how geopolitics is. The global north countries pick their countries of their interest where they have strategic relationship to bypass some of the things. Like, for example, what happened at Baku last year, what I felt personally was going to collapse, but then India and other countries had some sort of giveaways where, I mean, these are politics. I mean, we're not read on the everyday news. So they had some segues or giveaways, which India agreed on the text, and we have a text out of Baku even a day late. So that sort of thing that global south should not buy in for. You should step in together, maybe as BRICS, if even BRICS exists now, sort of having coalition with the global south. Also use the Middle East Gulf countries' influence with the global north to make sure that the strategic interest of the global south can be protected, rather than using it on a political levy from leaders to leaders than with people. So I think there is an opportunity for global south to be integrated rather than working on silos. And going back to the point of Dr. Ayad is that the technology and the money which global south deserve has to be transferred as soon as possible. We cannot negotiate more and more to get this 100 billion, which never reached, and the more billions are added at Baku also. I hope we can see in our generational time this money would ever come beyond loan to this part of the world.
Thank you, Nishat. Now I'll turn to Ms. Dayu, since we're talking about the tech transfer now, the technology transfer as a very key solution to climate problem, although there's also the risk, which I will come later on this question. But Ms. Dayu, how far away are we, the Global South, from catching up on this tech transfer? And do we really need to stick on relying from the tech transfer from the North, or can we find some other ways of, just relying on our, I mean, we have the weight already, increasing weight in this world right now. The Global South emerging economies are stronger than before. Are we capable, if we put out and eliminate the variables of the major economies?
I think technology plays an important role in the way that we mitigate and and adapt to the effects of climate change. Of course, catching up with technology is important. Technology plays a role, for example, in helping us making sure that we identify the right weather patterns, because weather patterns are changing, and when we begin our planting season, we need to also make sure that we transfer to renewable energy sources, having energy efficient infrastructure that are climate friendly and more sustainable. But at the same time, we must not forget that there are nature-based solutions that are, more aligned to the way that we manage our traditional knowledge, the knowledge that is already with our community. Sometimes there are indigenous also in the way that we protect our ecosystems, the way that we protect our forests, the way that we protect our water resources, for example. Those are very key in making sure that our communities are resilient, for example, in addressing the effects of climate shocks and climate-induced disasters and what have you. At the same time, when we talk about access to energy, there's always this there's this idea of moving really fast to electric vehicles, while at the same time we do not have the right infrastructure, or our sources of energy are still based on fossil fuels. While at the same time, in a lot of the global south countries, we are rich with geothermal resources, for example. We can have simple technology, micro hydros, mini hydros that are well and easily managed by the local and indigenous community. So to answer your question, yes, technology is important too. If we talk about the grandeur of technology, there is a need to catch up, but at the same time, there are indigenous local knowledge in the way that we protect and manage our ecosystems, in the way that we adapt to changing climate. And that is also a place where we need to start. So think about the resources. We need to also invest in education. And coming back to financing, it is also important to make sure that the financing are streamlined to this as well. So if we think about climate smart agriculture, climate smart infrastructure, we need to also make sure that this developing nations also have.
Thank you, Ms. Dayu. Still on the tech part of the discussion, but it seems that the impression right now is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wind for people to move to nature-based solution seems less appealing than for people to move to the technology waves. And this includes AI and so on and so forth, which really put a lot of waste, right? I mean, not put a lot of waste, but it creates some waste, and I think I saw somewhere, and then in the fact cards that it posed a lot of
energy. AI brings more energy requirements.
Exactly, energy, yes. And that's a problem that we again need to solve and tackle. So what do you think about that, Ms. Dayu and Nishat? You can jump in here, and Dr. Iya too.
Yeah, I
Also,
mean, yeah, AI is everywhere now, right? Dr. Nishad, and I was told that even adding a question mark adds another a draw for the energy need. So we need to also be very conscious on our use of AI, apparently, because it had emission consequences as well. Of course, there is this wonderful idea of going to the state-of-the-art technology, but those are not the only solutions. For example, we can easily reduce carbon emissions through local sourcing, minimizing food waste. The simplest technology, like from our farm to table, what are the waste that we have in each of the supply chains, and if we can minimize that, actually carbon emissions can go down as well. Smart agriculture, also reducing the use of pesticides. If we maintain the quality of the soil, how do we maintain quality of the soil? It's nature-based solutions. So increasing agricultural productivity through nature-based solutions actually reduce emissions drastically. I think I'll let Nishad answer on AI. Seems like he's very interested in jumping in.
I mean, not my interest. I've been here in the region when Donald Trump came in with a big pitch of AI for the region. The region is already super overwhelmed with the energy infrastructure. So I think this will put more burden on the regional, utility companies to really push for more and more energy supply, which will be, I would say, a mix of the nuclear plus renewables, etc. But going back to you on the nature-based, so nature-based solution needs its due. At the moment, people are only doing if there is incentives like through carbon markets. I think it's a good start. Not 100% can, but at one point that would be a normal thing to look after your environment. You don't need incentives to look after environment. So I think there is no one solution, one vertical to take care of or fight against climate. Either it's a tech, as long as it's not super expensive tech. People keep telling AI is a solution, but AI itself is bringing more emission as long as it's not relying on fossil-based energy system. And a big push on nature. It's not new. It's just rebrought from what we used to know from our past. Nature-based solution is nothing extraordinary, but fancily used by the global north that, hey, we have something new. It's been there. This is the nature we lived in. We're just protecting it. So that's if you ask my granny, she will say they used to do it, but they didn't have a coined word called nature-based solution, getting incentive to save it. But now people are forced to make incentives because if not, you're not protecting, you're logging it or killing it or using it for other purposes. So I think we need to look at multiple verticals. There is no one golden ticket solution for climate action at this point of time, whether through nature-based tech, which does not use energy, and other avenues. If they say nuclear is safe, I don't know to what extent do we have another choice if we can guarantee the safety with putting up a nuclear. So I think this has to be multiple verticals which can go together. I mean, at this point, even I cannot weigh if it is alternative energy, is it AI, or is it only nature-based going to help? Yes, I think it has to go hand in hand now. At some point, we will realize going back to nature is the easiest and most simplest and cost-effective solution we have.
Thank you, Nishat. Perhaps Dr.
If
Iyad
I, if I may,
Yes.
may I?
Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you. Look, I am one of the fans of AI. I love AI. And I really support the use of AI in everything. But let me put it that way. When cars were created 200 years ago, nobody said that we need to use nature-based solutions to commute, right? Otherwise, we would have stayed using horses or donkeys. When airplanes were created to move people across continents, nobody said, you have to run for months to get from one place to the other. But the problem then, we did not have the knowledge. We did not have the understanding of the consequences of our decisions. It's not to stop with evidence, but to develop with more scientific approaches, meaning AI should be watched carefully to reduce to the maximum minimum the environmental impacts. And luckily, this year in December, we have what we call the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA, which is the highest authority on the environment. And one of the 5 priority discussions is the environmental impacts of AI. So the global community is aware of its potential, but also is aware of its devastating impacts if not monitored, watched, and worked with. So as both Dayo and Nishat said, we cannot choose one over the other. It has to be a combination of both. Environmentally sustainable AI use for enhancing living in harmony with nature. So this is mouthful, but it represents, how green we should go and not to let one take over the other. We should combine and work with both nature-based solutions and technology-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. And if I may, we have maximum of 5 minutes left, but I'm going to throw this question really to close the discussion. Dr. Iyad put it very well, but really overall, we are falling short of our targets, of course, on this climate agenda. Time is ticking. And it seems that the pattern shows regularly this way, just this way, that we're falling short and falling short again, and then time is ticking. That's the pattern. We all talk about that. But if the pattern shows that we're heading in just this direction, if I may say stagnant, then something or a momentum needs to come. Like the Paris Agreement had its momentum back then, the JETP, when it was announced, also had its momentum, although now it's also facing quite a challenge. But really, do you think we need that momentum in order for us to really still have a hope to achieve our target on time? Because the pattern shows that we're not. Yeah. Maybe each of you can answer 1 minute to 2 minutes, yeah, maximum.
Can I start?
Of course, Ms. Dayu.
Sorry, Dr. Ian. I think yes, momentum is good because it excites us. It's bringing in money. It's bringing in the press. It's bringing in all the movement together. But at the same time, I think the awareness is there. I mean, all generations are now aware, despite what the U.S. is saying, that it's here. It's right in front of our eyes. I think we just need to move and trudge along and make sure that all of our resources, attention, policies are going to the right direction. So I don't think we need another momentum. I think if not, the world is tired of that momentum and the pledges and perhaps empty promises. I think it's more like making sure that our pledges are working, the institutions are working, the capacities are there, the money starts flowing, and making sure that the people do see and feel and have the benefits of all this commitments that are materializing. So
Thank you, Mr. Ayu. Nisha, Dr. Iyad.
Well, there is a momentum now for deregulation. There is a momentum now for nationalism. There is a momentum now for abandoning global cooperation and going towards maximum economic return at the national level. So momentums come and go and could be positive and could be negative. What we should actually pursue is multilateralism, and we should institutionalize that beyond any momentum. When we all agree on the common goods for humanity, and we work in a transformative approach, systemic, strategic approach, that no one country can simply say, well, I'm withdrawing from multilateral negotiations. That cannot happen. This is, leading humanity into the hands of those who have against those who have not. So it is the multilateralism system that we should continue, utilizing and supporting. This is what will take us systematically to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. Last but not least, Nishat.
Well, I echo both of my excellent panelists here. What I feel is like what Dr. Iyad mentioned. There is momentum for everything opposite of what we need, which is what I explained. I think we had the momentum. I think there's a big lack of the word called trust. And that's the only missing. We have this bilaterals, we have this government making sure it's a collective action, and some of the countries, despite this setbacks, are pushing for ambition. So I think at the moment, like you mentioned, Jenny, graphs are going far away, but hopelessness is not an option. We need to be more optimistic because that's how our generation in the past survived whatever through the ages. So I think this too shall pass, and the momentum would automatically will be back to where it used to be. But the only thing would be, Jenny, is like, hope that's not too late. That's the only question. Yeah.
Thank you, Nishat. I think the last closing remarks already is a good closing. I don't need to conclude so much, but it has been a very interesting discussion. We talk all the way from how to engage the local communities and the faith-based organizations to how a policy can be effective when it's bottom up. Also bridging the gap of the finance and then tech part of the solution. So we have discussed a lot of range of issues within this climate conflict and cooperation session. And I think we all have our parts. So I guess what all the speakers have said indeed true. We just really need to get to the ground and really keep doing things as how it should be done actually, and everything, the solution is there, just need the action to roll. So thank you very much everyone for watching the session. Thank you also Ravrinda and also the Asian Network for organizing this important session, the amazing speakers, Dr. Iyad, Nishad, Ms. Dayu, for your insightful conversations. Thank you very much. So with this, I close the session. See you again on the next opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.